Welcome to Ulua. You live, you work, you art.
Hello, I'm Carol from Ulua, and many people talk about feelings and emotions and how they shape our way of thinking, our lives, and all that. And I think they are really important, and we might be talking about it in a later episode. But, but, and this is a huge but, there is something that we are missing that I think it's even deeper and maybe key to understanding our emotions and our feelings. Sometimes it's relegated and it's left behind in order to just talk about feelings and emotions and how important they are. Again, they are super important and all that. But I think that our senses are even more important. And why is that? Because our senses, we are like a machine, right? Like our body is a whole machine, a whole system, and we have different stimuli that changes. Every stimuli has to be processed in our mind, in our brain, and then we get something out of that, and we get a reaction or an action. And first of all, our feelings and our emotions are produced because of our senses, because we see something, we hear something, so those are the things that are even more important than the processing itself, what I think it's emotions. And I will be talking about a little bit about the differences about feelings and senses, and why senses are super important to take in mind. As I was saying, we function, our whole body, our whole person functions like a machine, like a system, and we get all the stimuli through our senses. And there are 5 senses: sight, vision, hearing, audition, touch, which is somatosensation, it's called, taste, gustation, and smell, olfaction. And there are some internal senses also, which are proprioception, proprioception, which is the awareness of our position, our balance, the way our body is feeling right now, and that kind of thing. So that's proprioception. Yeah, I did that correctly. Okay. So again, our senses are physical, are more like biological, and we can touch things, we can see things, so it's more like kind of objective, we could say, something that's in front of us and we absorb them raw, just the concrete thing, super tangible. So it's immediate, it's quick, even though we never think about I don't know, taking this, and I generally don't think about it, the things that I'm touching or the things that I'm seeing. I'm just doing things because the brain, if we spend all our time looking at everything that we do, our brain will explode. So some things are we have already learned. I don't know, to smell. For example, at your home, maybe you're super familiar with the smell. This happens especially with pets. They are so used to specific odors, smells in the house. I can see that in my cat, for example. Whenever I came back from a travel, I had to step in the door of the house and she had to smell completely me and understand it was me that was bringing some smell from the outside that I couldn't perceive, but she did. So we have those kind of things. And I think if maybe not in the same sense that a cat, but we could get better at understanding our senses and also becoming better at processing them more consciously. And if you remember, this episode is called Unlock Your Spidey Senses, because when, for example, Spider-Man was bitten by a spider, was bit by a spider, he immediately could enhance all his senses and who could see different things. He was looking like a spider, feeling things differently. Of course, it's fiction, I know, but every superhero that you listen or you have watched, for example, Daredevil, he had he went blind when he was a child due to a chemical exposure, I think. So he had to develop more of the senses of his whole body, but not the sight because he didn't have sight. So, and it is said that people that are born blind, they can explore or enhance more their other senses. So when we are lacking one sense, our body or our brain, our whole self compensates it with other things. It could be touching, it could be hearing, different things. I have mentioned before that NLP talks about these kind of things, but I think it still, maybe we have more understanding now. I think NLP still lacks some things that I found that are super important for us as people to understand. And that is, for example, in NLP you have, or they teach you that you have a BAK, which is visual, visual, auditory, and kinesthetics. And I know I have heard from some baby coaches that I call them, that's, I don't mean to be disrespectful or pejorative about that, but I say baby coach when they are new, right? And many says, or I don't know, visual, for example, it has to do with sight, auditory with the hearing, but they say kinesthetic is touch, but it's not only touch, it's gustatory, it's olfactory, it's many things. So, for example, if you hear that, know that kinesthetic is about the whole body or the rest of the other senses that are not mentioned there. And why I think NLP is lacking some content there or some understanding is, and I mean, again, I think everyone should learn about NLP because it's like kind of basic or how our neurological brain works. It's like the basic understanding. What I've seen is that, again, I've said this before, I think that when people try to use this knowledge, they start by trying to understand other people's preference or sensory acuity, it's called in NLP, where you're trying to understand how the other people reacts first. But I think it should be the other way around. Understand yourself first and then try to understand others. Which is, I've already said this, so I think it's rather complex to, it's rather complicated, I would say, to understand yourself and imagine understanding others. So yeah, I think this is a good start if you haven't ever heard about sensory acuity or how to improve your senses, to study a little bit about NLP. And just to be aware of what are your preferences. And I remember when I did that, I think it was like almost 20 years ago when I studied NLP. When I first started studying NLP, I learned that we have certain characteristics that we associate with visual people, with kinesthetic people, with auditory people. For example, they say that visual people tend to be more loudly speaking. They think in images, and On the other hand, auditory people think logically, more logically. They prefer sounds. They prefer maybe written things and books and that kind of thing. And they like to listen to music, for example. Whereas kinesthetic people tend to be more in touch with their feelings, with their intuition, and that kind of thing. And it's interesting to learn that. And they have some kind of tests to evaluate yourself, what is your level of auditory, kinesthetic, or visual thinking. And at the time, I remember I ranked like, it was like 50, I don't know, it wasn't 50, but let's say, I don't know, like 40 and 40%. It was kind of equal between my visual and my auditory system. And I was practically not ranked or very little in kinesthetic. And I remember it was, for example, I don't know, like 43% I was visual and 37% I was auditory. And I remember thinking that was it. I was a visual person and that was it. But after some time I say, okay, I want to improve my auditory thinking or my auditory way of perceiving things, my audition. And I started practicing some things that they teach you. If you want to know some things, some exercises, please leave in the comments. I could share in the future. And I realized I had improved a lot, and I had also improved after some time being a kinesthetic person. So I think it's not one thing over the other, and I think you can balance them all, actually. But what I've seen also is that many, again, baby coaches tend to feel that they are one, or their coachees or the person they are talking to is just one thing. Now this person is visual and I will talk them like they're visual. Or I am a visual person and I label myself as visual and that's it. And I don't have to learn anything else. And I think that's a huge mistake, and then you can learn and improve your senses. All your senses, not only your visual, your auditory. You can also improve your smelling. You can improve, especially now after the pandemics, many people are still not able to smell. And again, it's not that we have smell and sight and taste, because smell is also entangled with taste. I learned that. I had, for example, my niece, she couldn't smell anything, and at the same time she had a horrible taste in her mouth during the pandemics. And because the system or the parts that taste and also smell are very interrelated, because we don't only smell with our nose, but we also use our tongue as part of the smelling system. I learned that some time ago when I don't know who was playing that to me, but it was really interesting to know, because you say, oh, nose is for smelling. It's not exactly like that, because it's all here, right? And the smell is also super important for us people in our relations, everyday relationships, especially with our partners. It's like super primitive for us people, for our mating systems, we could say, and that kind of thing. So they can be improved. And I think there have been several doctors that are, well, I haven't seen that much, but I have seen some doctors talking about smelling and how to improve, especially for the ones that lost their sense of smell during the pandemics, and how to recover it. So that's really important. And I think we tend to take for granted what we already know, as I said, or we sometimes label ourselves and say, oh, have terrible taste at things do that. I say that because I haven't yet mastered my sense of taste or sense of gustation, I think it's called. But yeah, there are ways to do that, and there are ways to become more aware of our surroundings. And right now, it comes to mind again. I had completely forgotten about this. I went to was 2 years ago. Yes, 2 years ago, I went to a workshop. It was a 4-day workshop, like a camp thing, um, for mask making with ceramics. And in that workshop, it's completely unrelated to the workshop actually, but we did, now that I think of, we work with our hands a lot, with the ceramics, with the mud, with all the things that we had to, the tools and everything was really touchy. And also with our site, of course, because we had to create things, and it was really interesting. But one night we spent several nights there, and one night I remember the organizers, the people who were organizing the workshop, they said, "Why don't we give you a gift?" And they said, "We have a gift for you." And everybody was called out of the house, and they say, "Okay, you will this I can't remember the name. It was like a tape for blinding us, and we were blinded. It was for the dinner party, and they took us one by one into the dining room for our dinner, and we were sitting all together, and they took us to the place and then they were serving us the plates, and we ate with our hands. Of course, all our hands were clean enough. And we were completely blinded, and they were playing instruments, the organizers, and it was really great experience. I really loved the experience of eating blindfolded with our hands. And I know half the people loved it and half the people totally hated it. Maybe it's because it takes you out from your comfort zone, but I decided to get into experience, to be immersed into the experience, and at least for me, I could feel every savor, every flavor of the food while listening to this amazing music that we're playing. And I really tried to hear and see with my other senses the whole experience, and it was amazing. For me, it was really amazing. And if you can do that, maybe if you want to experiment, it's a really good experiment to do. But you have to let yourself flow with the experience, because I went with a friend at the time to the same workshop, and she completely hated it, the experience. She said, "I like it. I felt so uncomfortable." Well, it's just a matter of experience, experiencing it by yourself and seeing if you like it or not. So there are ways, maybe not every day do that, but from time to time, if you want to, you can understand that it's not only sight, and that there are so many ways of experiencing your senses. Another thing why it's super, meanwhile I'm playing with this, why I think it's important to understand your senses is because otherwise they come out of control. Remember when Spider-Man, again, Spidey got bit by this spider, and after that he could feel everything, but he was so out of control because he had all at once this awareness of the surroundings and the things, and he couldn't handle himself. He couldn't even, I don't know, walk. He was completely confused in his mind. And so I think if we can also, I don't know if master is the right word for it, but we can understand and improve our senses little by little, of course. And as I always say, it's better to experiment, and by experiment I mean one thing at a time, not all the whole senses all together, because you might get out of control. You might not understand what you are experiencing because so many stimuli all together at once. So do things little by little. And again, in NLP, they say that for you to really connect and calibrate, they call it, with other people, to really resonate with them and deeply connect, they say that you first have to observe the person, then you have to calibrate with them. You have to get in the same, you have to synchronize, we could say, active listening, and finally you have to be self-aware of yourself. And that's where I think it's wrong, plainly, because if you're not first aware of yourself, there's no real way that you can actually get in touch with other people. And I've tried that. As I said before, as a baby coach, I tried all those things and I felt completely awkward until I understood it was the other way around. But maybe it's the process of just passing through those, how could I say, those wrong steps, maybe, I don't know. And again, our senses are biological, and our feelings, I will give you the difference, our feelings are mental, are a mental construct. So our senses are concrete things that are tangible, we can smell, we know smell, or we know what we're touching, if it's harsh, if the texture, if it's soft, if it's fluffy, and that's super concrete. Whereas the feelings, the things that make us feel, could be they're actually abstractions. They are constructs, things that we make in our mind. And because for a person, maybe touching this, I don't know if you can see this, or maybe this, which is kind of fluffy, touching this, for example, I feel like I like it, but maybe for some other person, they have had some other experience, and in their mind, this same sensation, they may think that's, I don't know, they might remind her of a wild animal or something, or a past trauma, I don't know. So feelings, again, are something that we make up in our minds, roughly speaking, of course. And again, senses are immediate. I can touch something, or I can take a sip of water, and even though they say water has no taste, it does. Maybe we are too used to it, and so I can feel the water, and immediately I know it's water, for example. But if I just feel something about water, maybe I can make up an image, or maybe I can take some time. For example, if I went through trauma with a glass of water, I don't know, maybe some people could have that. That trauma takes some time, so that experience that I have takes some time to reproduce in my mind, to make something out of it. The process is super slow. But touching it or getting my hands into the water, I can feel it immediately. So those are the differences. I remember, for example, when I went, was like, yeah, 2 years, maybe a little less, to the osteopath. I go there every time, but at that time she said to me, she touched me like it was in the stomach. I don't know which point, and she said, "Does it hurt?" And I said, "No, no, nothing is happening." Or I don't know if it was in my leg or something. And I said, "No, not at all." That you should be crying and shouting out with pain here because this point is super painful. And I said, "Wow, I have a superpower of not feeling anything." and and I thought it was a good thing. She said, "No, that's actually really bad because you cannot feel, and you are disconnected with your body, and your body cannot tell you. You don't have the sense for your body to tell you if you are doing something wrong, and you could get an injury, for example." And after that, I got my injury. It was totally unrelated, but yeah, my spine injury. And I started feeling it was like Spidey being bit by the spider. I started feeling everything, so much pain that I have never felt in my whole life. And now, last time I went last month, she said, "Well, now apparently you are hypersensitive because if I touch you in certain places where I should massage you so you could get better, you are hypersensitive." So I went to the other extreme, and now I'm trying to balance it. So that can happen when you are not fully aware of your senses or your state where your senses are. And this also happens with emotions. But yes, as I said, I will take you now to this little story that I have. When I was young, I used to be proud of being a robot without any sentiment. I called myself that at the time because everything that happened was like me, "Oh, okay, it's another thing." I was in complete apathy. Not in complete apathy, but yeah, quite enough. And then when I started becoming more in touch with my emotions and the ways that I felt, even though not completely with my body again. Sometimes I cried and I didn't understand that, and I say, "What's going on? I don't like that. I'd rather be the robot that I used to be." And the same happened recently with this injury that I had in my spine, that I felt all the pain in the world. And I think this is cumulative. If you don't feel at the moment that you are supposed to be feeling something, it will stay in your body somehow, and it will, hopefully, it will come out someday, somehow. Or if not, I don't know, you may end up with some other illness or something like that. And yeah, some years before my injury, I really understood how important it was to be in touch with your body, with your physical body, not only with your mind, and that your body is not only for carrying your head, that your body has a really super interesting function, and sometimes we leave it for granted. And I was starting to understand that. I think I now understand my body a little bit more, even though, as I always say, I've been dancing for, I don't know, ages, but I was not in complete touch with my body. And I mean, with the senses, with the physical senses, and now I can, if my, I don't know, any part of my body is aching, I know. It's just super aware. Maybe it's not that good either, but I will be balancing this, I hope. So it would be good for you to understand where you are with your body, in this case, with your senses. If you are really feeling your or are really perceiving the senses you're having, if you perceive the things around you, if you perceive if your body needs more sleep, if your body needs more exercise or less, or if you need some rest, because we are so busy. I always say, as a society, we are super busy right now, and we are always running and running and running, and we don't take the time to really understand about our more primal functions, like our body, our senses, our feelings, our emotions. And I think, especially if you want, I don't know, beat the AI, but if you want to somehow regain the power that we have as humans, this is the way. This is a way, by understanding your body, by understanding your functions, your all that. So again, yeah, I was going to give you the tips, and Matt, and then we continue. Okay. So if you want to experiment, for example, with texture, or with everything you want to experiment, it's better to start little by little, right? If you want to experiment, for example, with food, to get a better taste, and really understand how your taste works, that's something I might do in the near future. You don't have to necessarily eat with a blindfold. That's the word, blindfold. But you could do some exercise. Maybe try to savor the thing you're eating or you're ingesting, and not all the time. Just, I don't know, like the first piece of food that you put in your mouth for lunch, for example. Just that. Don't try to do it all the time, because you will be saturated. That's another thing. You can saturate your visual, your sight. You can saturate your ears. So do it in little doses, and one thing at a time. When you're comfortable or confident enough with that sense, then move to the other. Maybe have some rest in the middle. That would be nice too. So that's my approach to sense improving, I could say. And just practice, take your time. It's not a competition. You won't win any prize for this. So it's just for you to feel better, to understand yourself better. If you want, for example, to have this I never know exactly how to say it, but proprioception, which is, for example, balance. I was starting to do that. Now I haven't had the opportunity to restart it yet. Is to know how to balance yourself, how to do certain things like, I don't know, shaggling, for example, or shaggling while you are balancing on one foot or with your eyes closed, that kind of things that we were trying with a teacher some time ago. All those things, at first you will feel like, yes, I will say, you will feel like an idiot, like I felt. I couldn't do anything at all. But when you start practicing more and more, you will feel more confident time after time. So that could be a good exercise. Or you could also start with, I don't know, understanding your body. Maybe if you have an ache, not just calm it with, oh, I will take this pill and that's it. I'm not saying don't take any pill, because sometimes pain is super heavy. But if you can understand where it comes from, sometimes pain can move from one part to the other, trying to understand its pattern, trying to understand your body. And again, it doesn't have to be with pain, maybe with, I don't know, you're moving your hand and trying to understand how it feels, how your fingers are moving, and little things, or maybe massaging your hand, that kind of thing. It can help you. So yeah, do it slowly, take your time. It's not a competition, and I think you will be fine. And if you are willing to try more things, or you would like to know more about these things, leave me a comment your experiences and that kind of thing. You can also subscribe so you don't miss anything if you want. And that's it. I hope you find this episode useful and have fun. See you next time. Bye bye. Okay, this is editing me, and I forgot, because this came up to mind when I was sleeping. So half sleep. And I wanted to talk to you about, okay, everything that we have talked so far is about you with yourself, about your senses, just with yourself. So, but what happens when you are in touch with other people? Then senses are different, right? For example, when you are in touch with in an improv class, for example, like I used to go, and at first, for me, just my history, my experiences, and everything, I was super shy at the class, and it was really difficult to be in touch with another human being, especially with men. Even though I have worked with men and I have been around men since I was a little girl, and I have so many friends that are men. And but anyway, this close touch when you are having these improv classes, or when you are I don't know, you have to hug other person, or you have to I don't know, interact with them more physically, we could say. It was really uncomfortable for me. But of course, these classes are super careful. There's a teacher, and everyone is super loving. Really amazing people that I have now as friends in these classes. And you have to be at first, I think, if you are a little bit uncomfortable, that's normal. But you have to give it time in order to be able to, for example, to be hugging another person, to be I don't know, in some cases there are people that cannot be sitting next to another one very closely, and they feel super uncomfortable, or having to, in some cases, to exchange cursing other people. And I have several experiences with that, and it's really uncomfortable for you. But over time, due to practice and continuous and consistent practice, you start to become more comfortable with that too. So I think it's a good experience to have, and a good way to improve your senses regarding other people. Just that, so I don't make it super long. But I think that's really important. All we talked before is about you with you, and when with the senses around you, and now I wanted to introduce the thing about you and another person, or you and a group of people, and that kind of thing. So I just leave that for your reflection, and maybe you can comment something about that. Have fun. See you soon.
Stay tuned for Ulua's next episode.